Alright, in this video we're going to start walking down the path of the create mode of the terrain toolkit. And the first type of creation we have is Voronoi landform creation. Now this is based on a mathematical computation called a Voronoi diagram, which I'm not going to dig too much into, mostly because I couldn't explain to you the math behind them. I can only kind of tell you generally what they look like. But what this does, in short, is it takes your terrain and it breaks it up into a series of cells. Each one of these cells can have a feature in it. And by a feature, I mean something like a hill, a mountain. You can control what happens within each one of these cells. You can control the number of cells that you have. And let's go ahead and take a look at how you can do that. The first property we have under Voronoi, and that's actually going to be the same first property we have under most of these, is a preset. And the names of these presets, to me, they're a little bit on the misleading side because they're not necessarily going to give you nice rolling hills if you choose rolling hills. It's just really a way to adjust some of these sliders, is what it really boils down to. Now, we can also choose the feature type, whether you want to create peaks, whether you want to create rolling hills, or if you want to create plateaus, which are, of course, are flattened out on top, and you just choose the one that you'd like to have. Now, this is where we get into what's happening based on the Voronoi calculations. You can change the number of cells here with this first slider. You can go from 2 all the way up to 100. So what I'm going to do is start off just by setting this at 2. We'll set our feature type over to peaks and generate our landform. And what I want to point out here is what our terrain looks like. You'll notice we have a divide and we have these two features. Now, if I take my number of cells and let's just set it up to 3. And now you see we have these 3 features. This is how this works. Now if we crank it up to, say, 8 and generate again, you can count it. We have 8 separate cells. So our terrain is being broken up into these cells, and then a feature is created for each one. Now let's take a look at some of the other features, some of the other properties we have here. Next is our features slider. What this does is this controls a percentage of the cells that you have that are going to receive some sort of a feature.
Right. This will determine at random if a cell is going to have a feature or not going to have a feature up to a percentage from 0 to 1, with 1 having every cell having a feature and 0 none of the cells having a feature.
That's right. And an easy way to explain this would be like if we had 8 cells, such as we do here, and I set my feature count to 0.5, that means 4 of those cells should have features and the other 4 should not. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 cells here that have something in them, and the other 4 cells are completely blank. They stayed flat. Next we have scale. This controls the amount of downscaling that takes place between neighboring features. Now this may be a little bit tricky to see at first, so what I'm going to do is take my feature count and we'll set that all the way up to 100%. I'll leave my cells, actually let's increase the cells up to around 12, and we'll generate a map. Now currently the scale is at 0, so there's no downscaling between neighboring cells. If I set this up to 1, you'll notice that the result you have is that some of the features are very large, and the larger they are, the more their neighbors get kind of downscaled. It starts to separate your peaks without leaving anything in the middle nice and flat. So if you want some dramatic variation with some areas getting a large feature of some sort, and then you can take everything around it and kind of squash it down to make that one large one seem to stand out a little bit more. Now at the bottom we have a property that you're going to see pop up a lot while we go through the Create panel, and this is your blend. What this is in short is how much of the calculation you're about to run gets applied to the terrain that you're looking at. With a blend of 1, you are replacing whatever it is you see at the time. So if I was to set my cells up to 12, take my scale, pull it down to 0, with a blend of 1, I'm completely replacing my map, as you see here. However, if I change this value, let's say we now go up to, I don't know, let's say 50 cells. And we want all of those to get some kind of a feature, and we want some scaling there. But what I'm going to do is pull my blend down to about, say, 25%, or 0.25, excuse me. Now what this means is Unity is going to go ahead and make the calculation, but it's only going to apply 1/4 of that to the map you see right now. So you can still see the large features that were there, But now you can start to see all those new cells that were broken up. They're kind of laying on top.
Right. It's actually taking a new height map and combining it with the old height map and blending it by the amount of that value.
Now, admittedly, doing this a couple of times with the Voronoi calculation may not be all that useful, but I will show you a place where it is kind of useful. Let me pull my cells down to only about 4. And we'll go ahead and set the blend all the way back up. Then what I'm going to do is jump over to one of the other create modes that we haven't talked about yet, and I'm not going to worry too much about what its settings are, but notice that its blend is set only to 0.2. And you can still see those original Voronoi features, but we've added some noise to them because we've blended in 20% of this noise calculation. So the Voronoi blend works exactly the same way. The idea is it's just taking however this calculation that it has just made and only applying that percentage back to the terrain that you're looking at. So that is a look at the Voronoi create settings, which is going to wrap things up in this video. The next video we'll take a look at the fractal create settings.